This is the vehicle buying presentation. Obviously, Mayo is putting this on. Goals of today, high level overview. We'll get into some specifics if you guys have questions as they come up. But this is me. My name's Cameron. I'm a loan officer here. Kind of why me for this? I did about a decade in the dealer world, from about 2 years selling cars to 8 years in a finance office. So I did the math when I first started doing this presentation because I thought I wanted to have a fun fact for this. I've probably been a part of about 7,000 or 8,000 vehicle deals, whether it's buying, selling, whatever. So I've done it a couple times. Hopefully that helps answer the questions that you've had because I've probably run into it before. But yeah, today's objectives, just kind of help you be a little bit less overwhelmed. If you haven't done vehicle buying in a while, like you guys said, just kind of refresher course, right? Nothing crazy. Breaking down the vehicle purchase process, and then just kind of let you know what tools are out there to help, right? Because obviously you can go online and type it in, but what do you actually click? What's helpful, what's not? So yeah, we'll kind of go through that. There are kind of some basic steps that I always like to tell people to start with for the purchase process. And the first thing first is just kind of narrowing your search, researching choices, and then we'll get into some of the financing stuff, how to evaluate a vehicle, and of course how to actually go about buying it. A lot of this stuff that I'll talk about is, I would say, primarily dealer focused. We'll talk about some private party stuff, whether you're buying or selling your vehicle on Facebook Marketplace or like Mail Classifieds, stuff like that. But most of the stuff is going to be dealers, just because that's what people typically have the most questions on. So if you do have a question, whether it be online or here, obviously just let me know and I'll do my best to answer them. So that being said, we'll just kind of get right to it. Step one is just narrowing your search. This is kind of why I asked, like, hey, what are you guys looking at? It's trying to find something that fits the needs and the budget in that order, in my opinion. So yeah, is it a coupe? Is it an SUV, sedan, truck, minivan, stuff like that? And you'd kind of be surprised once you actually break it down to be that simple, because the amount of times I had people coming in, hey, I need a car. It's like, okay, well, that's broad. Where do we go from there, right? So, and then kind of once you figure out, okay, yeah, I'm looking for a smaller SUV or I'm looking to downsize, stuff like that, it just kind of bottlenecks everything. So now this is a big old do as I say, not as I do. Are you letting the vehicle, are you buying it out of emotion rather than kind of your needs, right? For me, it's all I buy my cars, like, it's terrible. Don't do as I do. But essentially, is it over your budget? Are you doing the midlife crisis thing where, hey, I want to buy a sports car and you actually need a minivan, right? It's that type of stuff that you just need to make sure to ask yourself. So yeah, look at actually what are you going to be using it for? Where are you going to be parking it? How often are you going to be driving it? And that'll help you just kind of determine what exactly you're looking for. Now, what type of vehicles are out there to buy? There are two listed here. I'm going to throw a little third one in there. But the first one is new vehicles, right? These are easy because you don't need to worry about vehicles history because usually they come with like 8 miles on them, right? And that's just like taxing them on and off a train. And so they also typically come with factory warranties. The standard factory warranty for manufacturers these days is 3 years or 36,000 miles on the bumper to bumper coverage. So when I say bumper to bumper, that's not like actual bumpers. It's everything between the bumpers, right? If you hit something, that's insurance. That's not factory warranty. And then typically it's a 5-year or 100,000 mile powertrain coverage. And powertrain is going to cover pretty much anything that touches oil. So engine, transmission, any differentials, stuff like that. Now, of course, that being said, most people have heard the phrase, as soon as you buy a new vehicle, you lose money as soon as you drive it out of the parking lot. And that is the case. Less more these days, just because it's, they're kind of, dealers are starting to get inventory back. But it used to be better to buy a new car, which felt really weird to say. especially having done it as long as I have. But they do get the best interest rates and or rebates. And I say that because an auto loan is essentially just a risk assessment of you buying vehicles, right? The newer the vehicle is, the less likely there is going to be a problem, the more likely you are to pay back the loan. So that is why you get that lower interest rate. It's just less risk for the bank. And obviously the older the vehicles get, the higher the interest rates are. That being said, kind of brings us to our next one, which is the used vehicles. Now, obviously these are typically less expensive because someone's already taken that hit in depreciation for you. Noted there. But there are a myriad of other things that you need to worry about, right? How was it treated in its past life? What was the maintenance schedule? Has it been in any accidents? Stuff like that. And we'll kind of talk about how to figure that stuff out and what to do if you don't have access to that information. But the third one I'm going to put in there is kind of an in-between. And may have heard of it, may have not, but it's certified used vehicles. Now, these are vehicles that are directly certified by the manufacturer. So for example, if you're buying a Ford F-150, you can't buy a certified Ford F-150 at a Chevy store. Doesn't exist, right? It needs to go through Ford's service to do that. And essentially what that is not only is it up to the dealership standards of a used vehicle and going through that inspection, but on top of that, it will go through Ford's service. Or Ford in this example, but their certification. Now, typically, does this cost the dealer money to do? Yes, right? It costs money to get extra stuff. Now, so typically they're going to be a little bit more expensive than your standard used vehicles, but they are going to come with things like additional warranty options directly through the manufacturer, and typically you can get better interest rates on them as well, just because, again, you got that additional check mark from the manufacturer, not just the dealer. You will not find those. Yeah, question?
Is there any way to know that those 110 points have been done? We just went through a situation.
Not really. It's one of those where typically if the dealer will have like the paperwork saying that it's been done, but at the end of the day, it's a trust thing. The dealership, so for example, at Chevy, whenever we certified a Chevy vehicle, we paid Chevy $1,800 to basically get that check mark, and then we would take it through those additional steps for that. And a lot of the times they were the same steps that we were going through for our standard service, but at the same time, cars break, stuff happens, things get missed. So honestly for that, it's just a trust exercise between you and the dealer, which thankfully has gotten better in the past 30 years, I hope, but it's still car buying and car selling. So in short, no. But yeah, so that's kind of that middle ground. That's certified. So they're the nicest used cars that you can get, and typically they're going to be lower miles, newer, stuff like that. So moving on, estimating your payments and setting your budget. Now this is one that I always had fun with because, of course, someone comes in and they're like, okay, I'm looking at buying this car, and you say, all right, what's your budget, right? Because everyone makes different money, right? I don't know you, you don't know me. Where are we at money-wise? Because that narrows down things exponentially. And they'd say, perfect, I want that brand new F-150, and I want it at $200 a month. And I'd be like, that's not how math works, right? So the big thing is just kind of setting yourself up for those expectations, right? Giving yourself kind of what is your ceiling, all right? Where is the I'm not going over that? And then setting that as your floor because you're probably going to go over that. So the easy math that I like to tell people though is typically on a 5-year loan, every $10,000 that you finance is about $200 a month. That's kind of the easy math. And of course you can math that out that every 1,000 more is about 20 bucks a month, right? And that's at a 5-year term. Obviously newer vehicles, typically people are taking longer these days to a 6-year term just because it's about the same interest-wise, and at that point you're not really owing enough on the car where interest really makes a huge difference. But the big thing where is you can use an online loan calculator to do this. We have one of these on our website. It is extremely underutilized. So if you go to our main page and you go to MayoEmployeesCreditUnion.org, go to our loans and mortgages and hit auto loans on the left side, there's going to be a little payment calculator. You can click on that, play around with how much you're looking at finance, over what term, at what interest rate, And again, we have all our interest rates posted there as well. So a good tool to do it. But again, it's one of those where you have to be within that budget, because let's say you lose your job or this happens or that happens, you have to still make that payment, right? Because a car is something that we use every single day for most people. So yeah, just estimate those payments, set that budget. That being said, researching your top choices. Everyone will have an opinion on this, right? What is the best car out there? What is this? What is that? You'll get horror stories from everyone, right? Just because cars aren't perfect. They break, things happen, especially here in Minnesota where it gets to -30 for a week straight, right? Because cars just aren't built to do that type of thing. And so find out everything that you can, whether it be reliability, pricing. Obviously, certain brands carry certain stigmas with them. For example, Toyota has an incredible reputation of reliability. Same thing with Honda. Actually, a lot of the Japanese market does. And so it's just that type of thing that it's just, once you kind of figure it out, okay, how did you guys, for example, land on the RAV4, right? You're like, okay, Toyota, you know it's going to be reliable. RAV4 is a name that's been around forever, right? What else were you looking at when you were? Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, and so when you go online and research those Toyotas, right, or you type in RAV4, you probably get a couple other vehicles that are compared to it often, right? You probably see the Mazda CX-90, or I think it's the 9, was the 90, whatever, you know what I mean. You also have like the CR-V, you have the American vehicles coming in with like the Escape and stuff like that. So yeah, using websites like AutoTrader, TrueCar, Consumer Reports is on here. Darren, remind me, I might have you remove that one. Because all of these websites, while they are great, you have to remember that these big manufacturers pay these companies to review their vehicles, right? If someone's handing me a $10,000 check and all I have to say is good car, probably going to say good car, right? So that's kind of one thing to keep in mind. But that's kind of the big thing, right? You got to look at a bunch of different sources, because once you have that, you can kind of sense some patterns. Question, yes?
You're saying you don't trust Consumer Reports because they get paid to test the vehicles?
All of these companies do get paid.
That's not what Consumer Reports.
Correct. They all get paid to test vehicles, always. The big thing that I'm kind of not a huge fan of Consumer Reports is you have to subscribe in order to access a lot of their stuff. A lot of people don't know that. So that's the big thing. If you're just at home and it's 10 o'clock at night and you're researching, Consumer Reports isn't going to be the best route for you, right? So is it a good resource? Yes. Is it something that I'm going to probably remove from this because there's other great websites out there that have those capabilities? Also, yes. So it's also one of those, we kind of picked 3, right, at random. Just Google it, right? Toyota RAV4. If you guys are shopping new, 2024 Toyota RAV4, you're going to get a million different options to look for. And the big thing too is a lot of manufacturers will have just basic information directly on their site. So I'm sure you've been on the Toyota website a ton, right? And you're going to be able to see the specs of these cars, what different trim levels are available for it, and stuff like that directly on there. And obviously they have the definition of bias because they're the ones selling it. So they're going to tell you the best stuff. Other companies are going to tell you, hey, maybe watch out for this, that, the other thing. But again, it's just broaden that research. Don't just go to one website and say this is the end all be all. So, but yeah, there's that. Also, knowing what's available in your price range, right? One thing that actually my favorite car to use in this situation is a truck. Just because there is a wide range of just truck that you can get out there on the market. For example, the other day I was looking because I was bored, and this is what I do for fun. You can buy a short box, single cab F-150 with a Coyote motor, 5.0 V8, great. It's $40,000, directly brand new, right? You can also buy a 2025 Ford Lightning Platinum for $125,000, right? It's still an F-150, right? And so that's the big thing, is obviously dealerships will list all of their inventory online, which makes it easy to compare things like trim levels and stuff like that, and most importantly, pricing. But things like if you're shopping Craigslist or like Facebook Marketplace and stuff like that, you don't really have those options available to you right there. So going to websites like Cars Direct, like not necessarily Consumer Reports, but like Auto Trader and stuff like that, where you can see, hey, these are 10 F-150s that are for sale in my area. Compare those pricings, right? Research the top choices. Once you kind of narrow down, okay, this dealership has probably one that I'll go look at. This one has one, but it's $500 cheaper, but it's 200 miles away. Is that worth it for me, right? And so those are the kind of things that you need to do. And usually dealer websites are actually pretty good for figuring out what is actually on the vehicle. They give you the pictures, they give you the pricing, they give you rebate options, stuff like that. But also too, hit the car lots, right? Just go drive them, go look at them. My favorite thing to tell people, it is actually illegal for dealerships to sell vehicles on Sunday. So go on Sunday. If you do go during the week or on a Friday or Saturday, it's okay to tell salespeople essentially go away. Now, granted, it is their job, it is their livelihood to sell you a car. So they're gonna do their best to do that. They're probably not gonna take the first no. But at the same time, use them as a resource, right? They're sitting around this stuff all day, right? Now, I can't all promise that they're all great and wonderful because I got to work with both ends of that spectrum in my time in the dealer world. But most of them are gonna try their best to get you the answers that you want. And so it's okay to just say, hey, I'm just looking, I just wanna see pricing, see what you got, maybe sit in them, open a couple up, whatever, even test drive them. So use them as a resource, but like I said, it's okay just to say, nah, I'm good, I can go from there, all right? That being said, once you kind of figure out, okay, I have 2 or 3 vehicles that are in my budget, they do what I want, let's go look at them. Securing your finances is kind of where we come in. Now, essentially what this is you can either come in here and talk to one of us directly, or you can do it online. And we essentially say, hey, you're good to spend up to X amount of money, right? And so most people, the nice thing is we live in Rochester, which is one of the smartest areas in the country. And so most people in this area have really good interest rates. It's actually, fun fact, Rochester has its own separate interest rate category from the rest of the state. So whenever we were doing loans, if you were in the Rochester area, typically you got a lower interest rate than if you were in the Twin Cities, just because they know we have the competition down here, such as Mayo, Think, stuff like that. But they also know that we also have the highest average credit score in the country. So, fun fact. So yeah, that being said, essentially what that is though is that pre-approval process just says, hey, you're good to go. You don't need to worry about where the money's coming from. You just got to figure out a car that fits that budget, right? So if you come in and you say, Cameron, I want to get pre-approved for a loan, and you say, all right, I'm shopping for something around 30,000, we'll probably do the pre-approval for 35, right? Just because you never know. If you want to, add mud guards to a vehicle and you don't want to pay for it out of pocket, throw it in financing, right? And so what that allows is you to go and shop and say, no, I'm financing through Mayo, I'm pre-approved up to 35 grand. And the dealer will typically say, all right, cool. Or they'll say, all right, do you want us to try to beat it? In that case, you say yes, because it's just money, it's just math. If they can beat our rate, let them beat our rate, right? But we're there for you if they don't. Yeah, that being said, dealer financing, kind of how does it work? It is a wholesale relationship with other banks. So for example, if you were to come in when I was working as a finance manager and you said, hey, I'm financing the vehicle with you, I would typically send your application to about 3 or 4 different banks that I know are gonna give both you the best deal while also making me the most money. Just is what it is. So that being said, if I found one that was 3%, great, I'd go with that. I'd offer you 3.5% and you're good to go. But essentially how that works is, yeah, I'm gonna send it, or the dealer is typically going to send it to a couple different banks and take the best offer from there. And then that bank that they finance with will give them kickback for saying, hey, thanks for finding a customer for us. And so that's kind of how that relationship works. But on new vehicles, I'm sure everyone has heard the 0% financing on your Chevy dealer this month on this vehicle, this vehicle, this vehicle. That is not directly through it is through the dealer, but it's directly through the manufacturer itself. So that is financing with Ford Motor Credit, that is financing with GM Financial, that is financing with those companies. They're directly offering those typically rebates or promotional rates. And those are typically all on new cars, sometimes certified vehicles, sometimes.
Okay, so
Mhm.
if you're able to just write a check for the vehicle you want,
Yeah.
talk about,
Why?
should I choose 0% financing?
Yes.
Or should I write?
No, you choose 0% financing. Yep, just because let your money make you money, right? And so it's one of those where a vehicle is technically a depreciating asset, right?
But they don't factor in the decision that you made that you want the zero financing, and there's something built into the price that they're gonna quote you on the vehicle.
Typically, no, but it also depends on how much you trust your dealer, right? It's one of those where, at the end of the day, it is still a transaction, and you need to be able to trust the person that you're doing the transaction with. So, but
I can't name names. Are there problematic dealerships in Rochester?
yes, that is all I will say. But I'm maybe one or two. Like at the end of the day, if you go to one of the big ones, it's the beautiful thing that the internet has done is they've removed a lot of the bad ones, right? Because at the end of the day, if you have a bad experience, you are 10 times more likely to tell someone about it than if you have a good experience, right? And so that's where things like Google reviews and stuff like that come in, right? So check that stuff on a dealer before you go, right? There are dealerships within 50 miles of here that I wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole, right? But their reviews also say that. So I don't need to tell people. So yes, but like, yeah, rebates, 0% financing. A lot of the times the way that that'll work is they'll offer you, hey, on your $50,000 vehicle that you're buying, again, easy number, we'll give you $5,000 off and you will pay 4% interest or whatever it is, or 5 or 6 or 7 right now probably. Or you can take 0% and we keep the 5,000, right? And at that point, it's just a math game, right? How long do you plan on paying on the vehicle, right? If you plan on paying it off in 2 years, you take the $5,000 and you pay interest, right? But if you plan on paying that off, that 0% off over 6-7 years, then you take the 0% all day, right? Because that's gonna save you more in the long run. So, and those are all just math. It's just math, right? And we can always help with that. So if you've gone through that pre-approval process and you're like, hey, the dealership is offering this, should I take the 0% and finance through them? Or should I take my rebates and finance with you? That's a 2-second conversation because we'll be able to do that math quick based off of, again, how long you plan on keeping the vehicle, how long do you typically pay, like do you pay off your loans early, stuff like that. So we can help with that. But again, typically new vehicles only. And typically, in order to qualify for those, you have to have decent credit, which, again, Rochester, most people aren't worried. So, that being said, once you kind of figure that out, it's just, yeah, pick the vehicle that you want, right? It's the fun part. Your work's paid off. And I always tell people, go in for a test drive, bring someone that you can trust that can keep you level, right? For me, it's my wife, because I get way too excited about the cars that I buy. And she's like, hey, you don't like the way that your knee hits the inside of the column there. Probably shouldn't get that because you're going to complain about it 20 minutes into our first trip, right? That's a true story, by the way. I owned a car for 3 months because of that. It drove me nuts. But yeah, like I said, go there, test drive the vehicles. If you've been working with a salesperson or if they've been helping you getting that information, go back to them, right? It's their livelihood. That's how they get paid. If they did a good job, repay them. Go back to them and say, hey, perfect, you helped me out with this. I'd like to test drive this, this, and this. And then at the end of the day, if you buy one, great, right?
Yeah, my experience, again, the last time we bought a car was 3 years ago.
Yeah.
But they don't let you take it without a salesperson doing the car.
Yeah, and a lot of that is now due to like insurance stuff because if you, and honestly, it's protection for you as a consumer as well. Because if a salesperson goes into you and you get in a wreck, it's on the dealer's insurance. If you go by yourself, it's on your insurance. And so it's one of those where, is it annoying? Yes. Is it to your benefit and also the dealer protects itself? Also yes. But at the same time, if they're really persistent about it, just you can always typically talk to the sales manager and be like, look, I don't feel comfortable having other people in the car. I feel pressure. I just want to experience the vehicle. And you give them a valid reason of why you do not just I don't wanna, right? Because that never works, right? If you tell them, hey, it makes me uncomfortable having someone else that I don't know in a vehicle with me, odds are 9 times out of 10 they'll say sure. And if it's the 1 out of 10 that say don't, then say, all right, perfect, see ya. I'll go to a different dealer, right? And so but at the same time, bringing that friend with you, bring a spouse, bring whoever, someone that can keep you level, and take the vehicle for like a proper drive. Like 10, 15 minutes is not enough. Do 20 minutes, right? Because that new car, like, jitters will kind of go away after a little bit, and you can actually kind of, okay, what do I like about this vehicle? What do I don't? Do I like the little things like cruise control, right? One thing that drives me nuts on my wife's car is the cruise control. When you hit the up button once, it goes up by 5 miles an hour. You have to press and hold it in order for it to go up to 1 mile an hour. It's like whatever engineer needs to be slapped. But like, it's the little things like that, right? Because that's what you remember about the car, right? Color, whatever. At the end of the day, yeah, you look at it, but you don't see that when you're on the inside of the car. So it's the little things like that you got to pay attention to. So that being said, not necessarily on new vehicles, but used vehicles, if you are shopping, how do I know that the vehicle that I'm buying is worth what it's buying, or what they're selling it for? And these are a lot of good websites that you can go to just kind of get some direct comparisons. But the big ones, I don't know, obviously Kelley Blue Book is a big one out there. Black Book, NADA, which is now JD Power. Darian reminded me to change that because they got sold. But these are all companies that will essentially scan your area. Typically, it's within about 200 miles of where you live or your zip code, and say, okay, perfect. Over the past 6 months, there have been 200 sales of Silverados, and the average sale for that specific trim has been this, right? And that's typically how those values are determined. Now, those are ever changing, right? One day they might be this, and then as soon as the odometer ticks over 100,000, it might be this, right? And so it's not just a number. That always changes. Now the cool part is we have one of these tools directly on our website. So remember how I said we have our payment calculator, then we have our rates, and we have our vehicle valuation. So you can go on there, hit the VIN, in there, and it'll spit out a rough number. Now again, I say rough number because there is a difference in between trading it into a dealer and selling it private party, right? You will always make more if you sell it yourself, always, okay? But then you have to go through the work of selling it yourself. Question?
So is there a way, I mean, you walk on a lot with the car and it gives you so many miles, but you don't know all the packages, you don't know if it's all-wheel, four-wheel, you know, I mean,
Yeah.
the LE, the SE,
Yeah, because there's a million different models and trims and stuff like that.
good way to ask the dealer, how do you know?
So if you're doing it yourself and you're just kind of like, okay, I just looked it up, this is an LT Silverado, what is that? The easiest way is just to go to the manufacturer's website, because typically the manufacturers will also have a lot of their older catalog listed. You'll have to dig for it a little bit, but for example, I was bored the other day and looking at 85 Fox body Mustangs, and I didn't know the difference between the LS and the LT that they offered back then. So I went to Ford's website and I dug a little bit, and they've had their entire catalog from 1985, and I was able to pick out the difference in between them, right? It was an engine difference, right? Exactly, and typically it'll list all of that. Nowadays, with the amount of features that are on vehicles, it gets harder and harder. The comparison tool, so for example, you guys are shopping Toyotas, right? You should be able to go through their website and compare directly, right? So compare an SE to an XSE to a hybrid, right? And you'll be able to see the comparisons, and it'll give you the differences, but that is the annoying part, unfortunately, of trying to determine it, is it just takes time. But a lot of the manufacturers will have those listed, and actually Consumer Reports will actually also have a lot of that information from previous years as well. And cars.com is a good one for that. So, but good question.
Reports at a good place to find. I really like quiet car. Is that, if you put in something that's quiet?
The problem with saying the best, the quietest car is you're going to run into a lot more opinions than you are facts, right? realistically, just from a mechanical side of things, just for you, an SUV is typically going to be louder than a sedan, right? Just inherently. It's off the ground, you got wind coming underneath, right? And then you have, obviously, it's like, you know, throwing a brick versus a ball, right? It's just got a little bit more to push through. So sedans are typically always going to be a little quieter than an SUV or a truck is, just inherently. And then from there, it's just how much you want to pay, right? I mean, right, if you're buying a Rolls Royce, let me know. I'll come with you over to Great Britain and help you do the delivery. But yeah, typically it's going to be hard to find something like that. But yeah, a quick Google search will give you a bunch of opinions, and then you'll be able to kind of see the trends. So, but yeah, verifying the vehicle's value. The big reason this is we don't want you paying $100,000 for an $80,000 vehicle, right? And vice versa, we want you to be paying $80,000 for a $60,000 vehicle. And you got to know kind of the stats on that before you do. All right. Now, that being said, when you're shopping for used vehicles, researching the vehicle's history is super important, right? You got to know how it was traded in its past life, right? Benefit of the new car, you don't need to do this, right? But used car, you know, it could have been a rental vehicle, right? Fastest vehicle on the planet is a rental. Right, and so it's one of those where knowing that is important. So there's a couple good sites out there that you can use to find out this information. Typically, dealers will have it directly on their websites, right? There'll be an option for AutoCheck or Carfax right at the bottom of the page, and you just click it, and it'll show you that. And that's because those dealerships are paying a monthly premium to these companies to give you that information, because they know if you see that it's a one owner, locally owned, never been in an accident, they're probably going to sell it quicker than one that's been in an accident, right? So they're going to show you that information. Now, mom and pop shops and stuff like that, typically they don't have this information, but they can get it. And you can get it too. So for example, I had a buddy of mine that was shopping for an older VW, an old collector VW, and he wanted to know if it was in an accident or anything. I was like, go to one of these. He's like, I don't want to pay the $15. I was like, tough. If you don't want to pay $15 to save yourself a $20,000 mistake, that's on you, bud, right? So a lot of those, you can get it through the dealership free. If you want to do it yourself, or if, let's say you're shopping private party and you just kind of like, you don't know, and it would make you feel better if you did, these websites do have an option where you can just purchase it. You type in the VIN of the vehicle, and it'll give you everything that it has on it. But it'll show things like maintenance records. It'll show if it's been in an accident or if there was damage. There is a difference between accident and damage, right? Me taking off my mirror, getting out of my garage is damage. It is not an accident. Someone rear-ended me, accident, right? I'm not going to report the mirror to insurance, right? I am going to report my rear end being in my back. Is worth it. They do give you a rough number on value, but not these websites. This is going to be like a Kelley Blue Book or like Black Book, NADA. Use those ones. And when you look it up, for example, if you go and you type in your car to NADA, which is now JD Power, or Black Book or Kelley Blue Book, it's going to give you kind of two numbers, or three numbers realistically. It's going to give you the MSRP, so what was that vehicle brand new? It's going to give you an average retail, and it's going to give you a trade-in, right? And the reason they give you those two numbers is because the average retail is going to be higher than the trade value, right? Because a dealership needs to take that vehicle in, they need to A, make money, but they also need to fix it up to a point where they can confidently sell that, right? So they need those tires that you're like, I'll probably do them next year. They need to replace those because it's their butt if something goes wrong, right? So they have to typically spend that money in order to get that vehicle to tip-top shape. The average amount of money that dealerships, or at least when I was there, typically spent on a used vehicle to get it back to selling order, $3,000. That sounds like a lot. And that's because it is a lot. And it's just little things, right? It's time and labor, but it's also things like, okay, tires. Okay, these brakes are probably good, but they don't meet those requirements of a certification or this, that, or the other thing, so we need to replace them, so those get replaced. And so it's the little stuff like that that adds up, right? So yeah, that being said, researching the vehicle's history will give you a small window into that, but use those other websites that we talked about. So, and then yeah, this kind of goes in to the free report. It'll give you things like previous owner information, and I say that with an asterisk because it's limited. So for example, it'll tell you, hey, okay, this was a vehicle that was originally purchased in Illinois or New York or Texas, but it won't tell you like Joe Blow from Texas owned this and here's his social security number type of information. So it'll tell you that type of information. It'll tell you how many miles were on the vehicle every time that it was reported, or every time it went in for an oil change. It will only do that if the shop that's doing the work reports it, right? If you do it in your garage, obviously they're not going to know. And so the big thing for me is if it doesn't have a vehicle history, especially in this day and age, it was probably treated like crap. Unless you know it, like the person that you're buying from religiously changes their oil by themselves in their garage every 2,000 miles, right? Or if they're that type of person. But if it doesn't have a history, I'm probably looking elsewhere, personally, right? But other people may not care, right? So that being said, salvage titles. This is something that gets brought up a lot. This is a vehicle that has been totaled out by insurance, but typically a company has bought that vehicle, done the work to fix it, and they are now selling it, which is perfectly acceptable. My first couple vehicles were salvage vehicles because I was broke. I was a broke kid, right? So I wanted to buy my fun cars, but I didn't want to pay fun car prices. So I bought ones that had been put into a wall or whatever. And these ones here, typically, obviously they're worth quite a bit less because they have been in an accident or they've been in hail or a flood or this, that, and the other thing. And the insurance says, you know what, nope, it's not worth us fixing it. Does it mean they are a bad car? No, absolutely not. There are plenty of companies around here that it is their entire business model to take these vehicles and redo them. And they do a very good job, and it will be a good car for you for a long time. That being said, sometimes your insurance may or may not insure a salvage title vehicle. So if you are looking at those, make sure that you ask them first. But always, when in doubt, just have a licensed mechanic look at it, right? Or someone you trust, right? That being said, stuff happens, right? When you have a mechanic look at it, they're not going to spend 6 hours removing the timing cover to see if a timing belt is bad or a timing chain. It's just not going to happen. And if 5,000 miles later it blows up, you cannot blame them because they're not going to take apart an engine just to say, yeah, you're good, right? Unless you want to pay them the $2,000 it's going to cost in labor for that, right? So again, cars break, stuff happens. I personally believe that everyone is trying their best, but like I said, if you hear the horror stories of, oh yeah, I bought it and then 3,000 miles later my engine blew up. It's like, sorry, what do you want? Like, what do you want us to do, right? But that being said, once you kind of figure all that out, you've done your research, you picked out your car, you secured your financing, it's time to actually make the purchase. Now, through dealers, I always tell people, plan your time accordingly. 3 hours is what I tell people, right? Because if I guess long and it takes an hour, great, I'm the hero. So that's the big thing, right? Because there's a lot of stuff that goes into that, right? A, did you tell me you were coming? No? Okay, perfect. They got to go pull the stickers out of the car, take all the plastic off, go fill it up with gas, and then you still got to do your paperwork, and then they got to teach you how to use the car before you leave, right? And it's the little stuff like that that you don't think about. So, but yeah, be clear about your expectations with your price, right? Say, no, this is what we agreed upon if they change it, right? And if they don't, be okay walking away because there's plenty of other vehicles out there unless you're looking at a one-on-one vehicle, which most people aren't. It's okay to walk away and do something else. But that being said, the one place that you typically can negotiate on nowadays is your trade-in, right? Because that is something that you are selling to the dealer. A lot of dealerships have moved to a one price or non-negotiation sales kind of, what's the word I'm looking for, model. But the reason that is because of the internet, right? If I'm looking for RAV4s, I can type in 2024 RAV4 and 300 of them are going to come up, right? So they need to, that price needs to be competitive. It needs to be a fair price. If you want to do all the research in the world and find the best price and then drive there and get that, that's great, right? Me, I'm not driving up to North Dakota to save $500, I'll pay the $500 and get it right here. So I could have a weekend, right? And so figuring out how much your time is worth with that. But yeah, you can negotiate on your trade. So if they come back and they say like, hey, we'll give you 10 grand for it, but you know that you've done your research and you're like, okay, well, Kelley Blue Book trade-in says it should be worth 14, where's the difference? Ask them, right? Legit, ask them, why are we so different here? And then if they come back and they say, well, your tires are here, your brakes are here, and this needs to be fixed, and this needs to be fixed in order for us to do it, and these are the prices of each of those things, okay, now you know your difference, right? They're not trying to rip you off. They just know that if they buy this vehicle, they need to do X amount of work to get it to the point where they can sell it and actually still make money. And if that's not something you're comfortable with, you always have the option of selling it yourself, right? And they're okay with that. They're fine if you say, no, I'll sell it myself, right? Question?
Question about the negotiable.
Yes. Yeah.
So my situation is that I have been leasing this car for 3 years.
Yes.
And because the buyout, I bought it before everything went sky high.
Yeah, you have a ton of equity in that. Yeah.
I like it, I'm not in love with it, but I can drive it for a bit of time.
I'll buy it for the buyout if you want. Yeah, and I'm sure the dealer's telling you the same thing.
So on a lease, when you buy out a lease, what is negotiable? Obviously not
Nothing.
the interest rate on the rest of the price.
Correct. So on a lease, I think you actually might have came in after we were talking about leases. But on a lease, the bank is betting, it's a gamble for them. They're saying in X amount of time, it's going to be worth this. And that contract you sign, that is what you can buy the price. That is the buyout price. There is no negotiation on that. That was a contract that you signed 3 years ago saying in 3 years I can buy it out for this if I want. So for example, what you can do, let's say you like the car but you're not in love with it, you probably get something new, buy it out, right? Just so that you can get your equity, because you don't want that going to waste because you just happen to fall into it, and great, take advantage of it. But on a lease, you'll always pay tax, title, and license on top of that.
Okay, so my next question is about the license. I just licensed that car.
Yep, so you won't need to pay for tabs again, but you'll still need to pay taxes and then some of the little piddly fees here and there. Yeah, you won't need to pay for new tabs.
Of course, they want you to just turn the car in.
Oh, of course they do, because they want your equity. Yeah.
We can get you a brand new car, same
Yeah.
amount of money,
Yeah.
same monthly payment. So if that's all I'm looking at, that's one thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is a little bit different because of everything that's happened over the past 3 years.
Exactly.
New cars,
Yeah.
used cars and new cars. And the buyout on this car is say, I mean, this is approximately $22,000. This new is $43,000.
Yeah.
Honestly, that's 2 years. It's from a 2022 to 2024. And
Yep.
I can't believe that that's.
Yes. Oh yeah. So you buy out that 100%. If you don't, I'll be mad at you. I don't know your name. I don't know your phone number. But I will call you and I will yell at you. But yes, you buy that vehicle out, and then once you find a vehicle that fits, you just trade it in as a used car. That's the process for that, because that way you get your equity.
I mean, it's pretty cut and dry.
Yes.
With
Yes.
the things that go along with that, there's really no negotiation.
There is no negotiation there. Nope.
You have to do it, you know what, I would have to do a trade-in because I'm buying the car.
Yeah, because essentially with a lease, you don't own the vehicle, which is why you need to pay the tax, title, and license, because you're purchasing that from the bank is what's happening. They just need to honor that price because that's what they agreed upon 3 years ago or 2 years ago. So yeah, no negotiation involved in that whatsoever.
Just one more question before you go on. I don't want to take all the time.
No, you're fine.
Financing, so you talked about getting the financing here, of course, bank
Member here forever.
member.
Yeah.
And if I was gonna borrow money, I'd probably borrow money here.
Yeah.
But the lease is through Chase.
Yeah.
And of course, they want you to, if you're gonna finance your car, they want you to finance it through Chase. And they
Correct.
seemingly make it very easy.
Yes, they do. Yeah, they do, because they want you to find.
Then what my
Yeah. So
rate, et cetera, would be through Chase. I mean, I've got everything through credit union here.
yeah, through Chase. I don't know. You'll probably have to call them. And typically the easiest way to do that is to go directly through the dealer that you leased it from, just because that's typically what I recommend with leases anyways, because they're able to handle the tax, titling, registration, all of that for you. And typically they only charge a small fee for that.
And they said that like you said initially, you know, when you were a finance manager, you just send out the request then to
Yeah.
several different institutions in
Yep.
town.
One thing that has changed though is a lot of the time the bank, the leasing companies have tightened up on that quite a bit, because they realize that people are just taking their money and running essentially, and so they have set up some rules where it's like, okay, this because it's their car, right? They just said if you are going to buy it, we'll sell it to you for this. But if another bank wants to buy it, correct. Correct, exactly. But for example, like let's say the dealer wants to buy that out, typically the dealer buyout price is higher than your buyout price. Yeah, significantly. Because the dealer's gonna buy it for retail because Chase wants their money, right? But they already signed that contract with you. So, yeah, no problem. Any other questions? Because I think that's almost it. Oh crap, I forgot about this one. Optional coverage. All right, warranties. What is it? What does it do? I actually forgot about this, darn it. Okay, so extended warranties. This is a question that I get all the time. I will go into this segment with a disclaimer. I am a biased party, okay? All I got to do and deal with was the bad stuff, okay? I buy them on every single one of my vehicles, right? Even if I don't use them, I do not care, because all I've seen is the bad stuff. Okay. Now, my dad, who is a mechanic, does not. Because he's like, nope, never had an issue. I don't want to deal with it. And I'll just fix it myself and pay it out of pocket. Because over the years, I'm ahead, right? Both of those options are perfectly acceptable. Okay. For me, I don't want to deal with it. If something breaks, I want to hand the keys to the dealer and say, fix it. And then I'll walk away.
You're talking about at the end of the 3 year, 36.
Yep, so additional coverage, something that is add-on from the dealer. Now, is it expensive? Yes, right? And that's just because the cars are more expensive nowadays, right? Look at your phone compared to your phone from 10 years ago, right? You have the entire knowledge of the human civilization right there compared to a flip phone, right? And it's the same way with cars, right? The amount of stuff that has been added to vehicles in the past 10 years is insane. Nowadays, it takes a computer to fix a computer to fix the computer, and even then it might not work, right? Versus my 2002 GMC Sierra that I have, I replaced the engine, and I pretty much needed 4 tools, and that was it, right? And so there is a difference, right? Now, you're the one that make that judgment call. If it is worth it to you price-wise, buy it, right? But that being said, at the same time, typically through dealers, these are negotiable. Because this is where dealers make a good chunk of change, right? Now that being said, do not ever buy one online, okay? If you are going to buy one of these extended service contracts, buy it through a dealer in your local area. And the reason I say that is because the dealer has every reason to say yes, okay? Online has every reason to say no. Okay, if you buy it from a dealer, they're going to want to back their product. They're going to want to back their warranty. So they're going to try their best to make sure that that warranty company covers the parts that are covered. Okay, because nowadays dealers make more money if they do warranty work than if they don't. It used to be the other way around until Minnesota recently passed a law that said nope, it's got to be even at least. So that being said, if you buy it online, they don't care at all. They're going to try to find every single reason they can to say no, because they don't have to talk to you face to face and they can just ignore your phone calls, right? But if you go to a dealer, again, it's backing the product that they're selling. They're going to do their best to try to get you taken care of, okay? Now, typically these things do not cover things like maintenance, right? So it's not going to cover oil changes, tire rotations. It's not going to cover fluid. It's not going to cover like a 30,000 mile tune-up or a 60,000 mile tune-up. But let's say that touchscreen goes out, it's going to pay for those, right? If your backup camera goes out, it's going to pay for those, right? If your engine just decides, you know what, I'm done, it's going to pay for that, right?
What do they usually customarily cost?
Depends on the vehicle.
Extensive.
It depends on the vehicle, right? So for example, Yeah, let's just do a scenario. So you come in, and I'm still a finance manager, and you're buying a brand new F-150 from me. Okay, it comes with a 3-year, 36,000-mile bumper-to-bumper coverage to the manufacturer, and 5 years and 60,000 miles of powertrain coverage. Right, powertrain coverage, engine, transmission, drivetrain. Essentially, if it touches oil, it's covered. Bumper to bumper, that's all your electronics, it's all your tech, things like heated seats, all the buttons, all of the steering wheel controls, all that stuff, right? The first couple questions that the dealer is probably going to ask you is how many miles a year do you drive, right? Now around here, with the cities being where it is, and Byron, Chatfield, Casson, people live in a little bit of the outskirts, the average person will typically drive 12,000 miles a year. Right? So that 3-year 36 works perfect, right? Okay, but what if you drive 20,000 miles a year? It's 3 years or 36,000 miles. So that's a year and a bit of coverage. It's not 3 years. And so me, being the savvy finance manager that I am, I'm gonna say, hey, how about instead of 3 years 36, we do 5 years 100,000 miles? Because you said you typically keep your vehicles for 5 years and you drive 20,000 miles a year. So we can take that bumper-to-bumper coverage and push that out, and it'll cost you X amount of money. We can roll that into a loan. It'll be X amount of dollars per month, right? And so that's kind of how that process works. Now, the X amount of dollars, that depends on the vehicle, right? Because a BMW is going to be a hell of a lot more expensive than a Chevy. And that's just inherent, right? And same thing too, right? A Corvette's going to be a lot more expensive than a Ford Escape. And so average, I would say $3,500 to $4,500 ish. But yeah, but I'm the type of person that I'll pay that just so I don't have to deal with it, right? Because if I know if I use that once, that touchscreen, if my touchscreen goes out, that pays for itself. I'm good. That touchscreen is probably 8-10 grand because that's running the whole car nowadays. So again, it's just which bias do you lean towards? If it's on the fence, negotiate, right? Take 1,000 off, then I'll do it. Probably say, okay, here you go, right? So,
I didn't realize like warranties were like,
oh yeah, they're negotiable, they're customizable.
they are pretty negotiable.
Yeah, they are negotiable, but at the same time, like me as a finance manager, that's how I made my living, right? I didn't get paid per car. I got paid on what I sold. Right? So if you want to negotiate with me, yeah, I'll negotiate, but I have my limits too where it's worth it to me just to say no, right? But yeah, there's typically a little wiggle room in there. Mm-hmm.
In doing that, does it make a difference how you drive the car? Like if it's only taken on interstates for long trips as opposed to it's only driven in town?
In that situation, no, but typically it's a time or mileage situation. Obviously, there is such thing as neglect, right? If I buy a Mustang and I just beat the crap out of it until the engine blows up, and then they look under the hood and it's just black because I didn't change the oil for 20,000 miles, they're gonna be like, no, I'm not paying for that. That's neglect. And so, but if you're taking care of your car and you're doing your oil changes when you should and stuff like that, no, it doesn't really matter if you're driving on the highway or in the city. That's typically where the mileage and timing can be adjusted and customized to what you do. So, yeah, good question. Any other questions on this while we're on it? Sweet. I'm going to skip that. Gap coverage. This is something that we probably do on 5% of loans, but I'm going to go over it. Let's say you buy that Corvette for $100,000. You don't want to put any money down on it. So tax, title, license, you finance $110,000. Let's say you take that brand new Corvette and you run that thing straight into a wall because you're going too fast. Insurance is only going to pay what that car is worth. Right? So new car, you drove it off the lot. Let's say you kept it 6 months. They're probably going to give you 90, okay? But you still owe 110. Gap coverage pays that difference, up to a certain amount, obviously. But I used 100,000 because that's easy math. So, so that's what gap coverage is. Typically, it's $4 or $5 a month. Like I said, we do it on maybe 5% of the loans because everyone in Rochester is pretty darn smart. They don't go upside down on their vehicles too often. Especially with the market where it is. But it's always an option, and it's something that the loan officer will typically bring up if you're close to that situation. All right. That's kind of it. That's all I got for you. So I know that was long-winded. I know I went on a couple rants, but hopefully you got the information that you were looking for. If you are looking to do pre-approvals, obviously, like I said, you can do it online or you can do it walk into any one of our locations. We always have a loan officer available for you. And then, yeah, use our website. We have those resources available to you. So that being said, we will offer you the best rate that we can. If someone beats us, great. It's just math. It's just money, right? But if you want to use us because of the convenience and we're a little bit higher, we're here for you, okay? Obviously, that's me. I'll put my info on the screen there, so if you need to give me a ring or shoot me an email, you can. But yeah, that's about all I got for you. So thanks for coming. Thanks to the online folks for tuning in. And yeah, have a great day.
Okay.
Yeah, question?
You're dealing with, so you get pre-approved
Yes.
for you.
Yep.
And you tell the dealer that. Do they contact you then?
So essentially, yeah, so we'll just go through that process quick. So let's say you get pre-approved, you buy the car. All I need to finalize the loan is what's called a purchase agreement. Okay, so think of that like a receipt, right? So the dealer will give you that information. It'll have who's going to be listed on the title, what vehicle you're buying, for how much, how many miles are on it, what's the VIN number. It'll have all your tax, title, license, any down payment, and then it'll have your total amount financed, okay? And we need to be listed on that purchase agreement as a lien holder because we're going to own the vehicle until you pay it off, right? Once I get that, we finalize the loan. And a lot of the times, people don't even need to come in. We typically sign a lot of stuff via DocuSign. If you want to come in, great. But yeah.
They just email you a copy then?
Yeah, or yeah, so you'll get a copy, the dealer will have a copy for their records, and then I need a copy. So whether they scan their copy over or you just snap a picture and send that to me, doesn't matter as long as I get it.
I didn't know if there was a delay in there. It's like,
No, yeah. Yeah, there is inherently a little delay because you're adding in that third party, right? But if we get you a better rate and save you some money, it's always worth it. So, yeah, exactly. So. No, go ahead.
So like they said,
Mm-hmm.
you can just come out and we'll take care of everything, is what they
Yeah, as long as we'll take care of all the money.
So no matter what you decide to do, if you decide to release or decide to buy it out, just come on out. We have relationships with lots of lenders
Mhm.
in town.
Yeah.
And of course, because many of us are male and
Mhm.
probably most of us have male credit unions,
Mm-hmm.
can they
No.
do that?
No, so we don't do any sort of indirect lending. So like they can't send us a credit application. We don't do any indirect lending with anyone. Because we're just,
Do you know what the interest rates are at the various places?
we post all our rates online. In terms of other banking institutions, it depends on the bank. And it also depends on your credit score, how much you make a year, stuff like that. So for those variables, that is up to them on whether or not they want to tell you. We will always post our best rates, and you have access to those, and they have access to those, so they see them. But yeah, they do have I mean, for example, like when I worked at the Ford store, we had relationship with Ultra Federal Credit Union, who's a local bank here. They do a lot of indirect lending, and we sent a ton of loans through them. So yeah, they probably do. They do have relationships with a bunch of local banks here, but it's just whatever's going to work best for your financial situation. But no, they are not able to submit an application to Mayo for you.
What they can do is they know the interest rate, they know.
They can try to beat us.
Do the calculation as easy as we can on our own.
Correct.
right?
Yep.
And that interest rate that's posted, that's the best
That is,
scenario.
that is best case scenario. Correct. Yeah. I mean, if you come in and you're like, I haven't paid a bill in 2 years, do I get that rate? The answer is no. There's obviously higher rates for that, or just a flat out no. But yes, those are our best interest rates that we offer. We always post those and update those when anything changes. So yeah, good question. Any others? Cool. Well, like I said, my info's up there, so if you have questions, give me a call, shoot me an email, whatever. But I'm hungry, so I'm gonna go get some lunch.